Hi there. In this lecture we see a young Bobby Fischer playing the King's Engine attack. This is in 1957. Let's have a look at this game against Richard Fauber. So this was in the New Western Open, round 1. Knight f3 from Fischer. So Fischer enjoyed playing the King's Engine defense, which if we flip the board, the King's Engine defense often runs like this, where black accepts white having an occupation of the center. So Fischer is reversing the knight f6 and playing it as white here in this early game. So knight f3, knight f6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, white castles, black castles. But black hasn't occupied the center. Black has also played a kind of King's Engine defense against the King's Engine attack. So we see d3, d6, so symmetrical variation now. e4, e5. Knight bd2, so we have a classic setup with these knights on d2 and f3. We see knight bd7, a4, so the knight seems to want to use knight c4 without disturbance with b5. We have rook e8, knight c4. One thing to note about this position is that d5 could be a dangerous possibility. At the moment, black may not want to weaken the e5 pawn. We see h6, and now knight e1 is played, knight f8, and here young Fischer seems to play an inaccurate move, f4 straight off the bat. It seems a mistake, but it wasn't really exploited by black. Knight e3 would have been better to keep a secure grip on the d5 square, so that f4 has less of a downside to it. So for example, c6, f4 here is interesting. If black eventually plays e takes f4, white should have a small edge. Black doesn't have to play e takes f4 though. If knight bd7, white could play f5, but black should be fine here. This should be about equal. So knight e3 was, it seems, the more accurate move. Fischer actually plays f4. And I thought this was, even though it's an early Fischer game, I thought this is an instructive kind of mistake potentially. What do you think black should play here for 100 points? Okay. I would say black should play e takes f4 and then d5. Top engines are giving this. Black's actually, doing really well. The reason is, well, if e takes, that looks like a miserable move. We end up with this bishop blocked in by its pawn, and black's pieces are super active here. Black has the f5 square. It's a beautiful position for black. The problem is, if the knight now, goes to d2, d takes. Can you see what the problem here is for 100 points? What does black play here? Yeah, this would be really bad. Knight takes e4. There's a pin on the d1 queen. The queen's actually unprotected here. So if knight takes, taking the queen. If bishop takes, rook takes e4. So okay, so this is problematic. But thankfully, in fact, the opponent didn't play e takes f4, but played d5 straight off the bat. This is a mistake not being punished, but a return mistake. Fischer's fine here now. F takes e5, d takes c4, e takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now h6 is hanging. Bishop takes h6. b2 drops, okay, rook b1, bishop g7. And here, this actually makes things worse, bishop g7. Black should have played bishop h8. So white should have a small edge here, for example, like this. There should be a small edge for white. But with bishop g7, black is weakening their king a bit. We have bishop takes, king takes, and now queen f3 was played. Actually, a clear move for an advantage with the classic pawn duo is d4. This pawn duo is very nice here. But queen f3 is still quite a good position for white. Queen e7. An alternative, queen d4 check, this position should be quite nice for white as well. White has that f-file pressure. So anyway, queen e7, d4, knight e6. Queen c3, a nifty move. So threatening d5 check, as well as queen takes c4. we have the knight moving out of the way there. Queen takes c4, bishop h3. Yeah, this is a problematic position with the queen eyeing f7. So, you know, if knight takes, white could consider bishop takes, and then try and drag the queen away from f7. So yes, this is great now, great news for white. And also now with bishop h3, another pawn is taken. Bishop takes, knight takes, and we have queen takes e4. Rook takes c7, queen e2, queen takes e2. Here, actually, there's an alternative. Can you see what that is in this position? It looks like the knight's holding f7, but what can we play here for 50 points? Yeah, it turns out here we can actually play this. We can crash through, and if, you know, queen takes, we can gang up on g6 here. This is quite effective in this position because, for example, rook g8, you know, we've got this kind of tactic with knight f4 check. So, you know, this would be a very, very dangerous position. If knight takes, queen takes, there's actually a way of checkmating the king, going round the roundabout there for this position. So anyway, yeah, in fact, Fischer played queen takes e2, but this is good anyway, h4. And this gives the king the h2 square. Yeah, otherwise this could be a little bit more dangerous than it needed to be. So the king's given h2, knight h3 check, king h2, knight f2, knight f4 hitting the rook, not scared of discovered checks, we're hitting the rook, rook d2, king g1, knight g4. And now, yeah, guess what Fischer plays here for 10 points. Yeah, he uses that pin in the position, acutely tactically aware, knight e6 check, and now with here, rook f takes f7, and there's a mating net building up here. Black actually resigned in this position. If knight f6, you know, we're just going to take the knight, but, you know, if not knight f6, you know, if rook e8, then it's just a standard mate pattern, like that. The knight's actually controlling the f8 square. Two rooks on the 7th is very bad news for black indeed. Yeah, when you get two rooks for a 7 on the 7th, doesn't matter if you're playing IM or GM. You know, look for the win, otherwise you'll live with regret. Yeah, two rooks on the 7th are absolutely deadly usually in the middle game. So anyway, an interesting and instructive game in my view. It's an early Bobby Fischer kind of reusing his King's Indian defense as white, and we get a kind of King's Indian defense with black. So we get a symmetrical variation, King's Indian attack versus King's Indian defense. So a key point I thought was instructive about this game is this f4. Without clamping down the d5 square, one has to be on the lookout for this kind of mechanism. The same mechanism is in other openings. For example, if in the Slav defense, black often wants to play for e5, but plays d takes first and then e5. So this mechanism, if you're going to play for a central break, make sure that there's no major downside to it. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, black blunder, but also white should make sure that the central break is ruled out with knight e3. So a mistake was rewarded by a mistake here. And Fischer was still in the driving seat. He shouldn't have been, it seems. He shouldn't have been. This was too good to be true, this bit of news here. So anyway, he made progress from this position. Queen c3, very nifty move. And then, you know, this is starting to be, you know, a very bad position for black. Black managed, you know, to take off this bishop so the queen could take on e4, sure. But yeah, this, you know, too many pawns are being lost here. So this was kind of easy. Even, you know, Fischer's continuation was good enough. So yes, a crush in the end. Some instructive points, though, to bear in mind about central breaks. Factor in the central d5 break if going for f4. Okay, hope you enjoyed that one. Thanks so much. Hi guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you want more Bobby Fischer content, check out my King's Crusher TV page. And if you go to the bottom of it, it starts at the bottom with 1970 to 1992. I also have two other Bobby Fischer courses. I found him absolutely fascinating to study. So there's 1956 to 62, early in his career. and there's 1963 to 68. So I hope you find those interesting. You might want to check them out, all the free samples. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. Comments, questions, likes, shares, always appreciated. Thanks very much.